The bioscanner at Waystation Epsilon had been operational for 10,000 years without a single malfunction. It measured everything from radiation exposure to contraband smuggling, but its primary function was the one that mattered most to the Galactic Council: fear response analysis. Every sentient species in the known galaxy exhibited measurable fear. It was the universal constant, the biological imperative that kept creatures alive long enough to become spacefaring civilizations. Which is why Security Chief Vorn was staring at his display screen like it had just insulted his mother. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, tapping the screen with one of his 4 manipulator appendages. His eye stalks crossed and uncrossed in the Kralthian equivalent of a migraine. "Run it again." Marcus Webb stepped back through the scanner archway for the 3rd time, hands in his pockets, looking about as concerned as someone waiting for toast to pop. "Still broken, Chief?" "It is not broken," Vorn snapped, all 4 eyes narrowing. "The scanner has not malfunctioned since the Taraxian Empire, and they have been extinct for 6 millennia. So that's a yes on broken." The display flickered again. Same result. No fear detected. Vorn's secondary hearts began palpitating. In his 40 years of security work, he had scanned precisely 847 different species. Brave ones registered low fear. Cowards registered high fear. Soldiers, merchants, diplomats, even the supposedly emotionless Volnathi showed something. Fear was survival. Fear was biological fact. Fear was what separated living creatures from very confident rocks. This human registered nothing. Marcus leaned against the scanner frame. "Look, I've got a cargo delivery scheduled in 20 minutes. Can I just sign something that says I promise not to be a robot assassin?" "Robot assassins feel fear," Vorn said distantly. "We tested them. They fear obsolescence." "That's actually pretty deep." "Do not speak." Vorn's manipulators flew across his console. "I am initiating Protocol 7. Is Protocol 7 worse than Protocol 6? Protocol 6 is for biological weapons. Protocol 7 is for things we do not understand." Marcus whistled. "So I've graduated from dangerous to confusing. Mom would be so proud." Dr. Kelvin Vrax arrived 14 minutes later, looking like he had consumed his body weight in stimulants and regret. The Exarian xenobiologist's scales were flashing colors that Marcus's translator unhelpfully labeled as academically distressed. "Show me," Vrax demanded, clutching a data pad like a security blanket. Vorn gestured at Marcus, who waved. "He looks normal," Vrax said. "The scanner says otherwise." Vrax pulled out a handheld unit, pointed it at Marcus, and watched his scales shift to scientifically horrified. He ran 3 more scanners, each increasingly elaborate. A full-spectrum biosensor, a neural activity mapper, something that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. Marcus endured it all with the patience of a man who had once sat through a 12-hour flight next to a crying baby, and a person who reclined their seat the entire way. "So," Marcus said as Vrax attached the 7th sensor to his forehead, "what exactly are we looking for?" "Baseline fear response," Vrax said, not looking up from his datapad. "Elevated cortisol, adrenaline spikes, amygdala activation. Literally anything that indicates you possess survival instincts." "Oh, I've got survival instincts. Last month, my cargo ship lost engine power near a black hole. Had to manually restart the reactor while being pulled toward oblivion." Vrax's scales flickered. And I fixed it. Grabbed a sandwich after. Turkey and Swiss. "But were you not terrified?" "I mean, I was annoyed. Black holes are not on the approved flight path." Vrax made a noise that Marcus's translator interpreted as existential screaming. The doctor ran another scan, this time showing Marcus images designed to trigger fear responses across species. Predators, natural disasters, tax forms, nothing. The human's biosigns remained steady as a metronome. "This is impossible," Vrax whispered. "Fear is not optional biology. Fear is the reason your ancestors did not pet the large predator. Fear is why civilizations build walls and governments and insurance policies." "Sure," Marcus said. "But at some point somebody had to leave the cave. Hard to invent spaceships if you're too scared to try new things." Trying new things and having no fear response are different concepts. Marcus shrugged. Are they, though? Vorn, who had been watching this exchange with growing dread, a sensation he was now acutely aware of, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should scan others to confirm the equipment functions properly. They scanned Vorn next. His fear signature lit up like a festival display. The screen helpfully listed his top concerns: failure to follow protocol, disappointing his supervisor, retirement paperwork, and something called casual Fridays. Marcus tried very hard not to laugh. He failed. By hour 6, Marcus had been moved from the security checkpoint to a holding room, which was then upgraded to a conference chamber when the Galactic Council decided this warranted an emergency session. He sat in the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from 24 species, all of whom were regarding him the way one might regard a bomb that was also a philosophical riddle. Ambassador Krill, a Danthorian with too many limbs and an even greater abundance of passive aggression, adjusted his translation collar. Let us review the facts. You are human. From Earth. A Category 7 death world. Category 8, actually, Marcus said cheerfully. We got upgraded last year after someone told the council about hurricanes. Krill's limbs twitched. Yes, quite. And you registered no fear response on a scanner that has never malfunctioned. So I've been told. Several theories have been proposed. Krill gestured to a holoscreen that displayed a list. Theory 1. You are a spy using advanced fear suppression technology. Don't have the budget for that. Theory 2. You are a prototype weapon designed to infiltrate our stations. I haul industrial lubricant for a living. If I'm a weapon, someone made weird choices. Theory 3. You represent a subspecies of human with mutated neurology. Marcus unwrapped a sandwich he had somehow procured. I'm pretty standard issue, actually. Grew up in Ohio. Very normal childhood if you ignore the tornadoes. Representative from the hive worlds, speaking through a translation swarm, chittered urgently. We propose quarantine until we understand the anomaly. I propose we dissect it, offered a Corinthian scientist, with perhaps too much enthusiasm. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich. I'm going to rate that theory a 2 out of 10. Loses points for being murder. Ambassador Krill raised several limbs for silence. Human Marcus Webb. What do your people fear? The chamber went quiet. Marcus chewed thoughtfully. That's actually a great question. We fear plenty of things. Death, loss, public speaking. The ocean, sometimes because we know there are things down there but we keep going anyway. Spiders, even the harmless ones. The dentist. Running out of coffee. He paused. Also geese. Geese are absolutely terrifying and I will not be taking questions about that. But the scanner, Vrax interjected, still clutching his datapad like it might save him. The scanner detected nothing. Well, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. Maybe your scanner is measuring the wrong thing. Marcus stood up, which caused approximately half the council to flinch. He held up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Look, I'm not a scientist. I barely passed high school biology, but I think I can explain this. He walked to the center of the chamber. You're measuring fear like it's something that stops us. For humans, fear is more like an annoying friend who keeps saying, "Are you sure about this?" while we do the thing anyway. Vrax's scales were cycling through confused colors. That makes no evolutionary sense. Doesn't it, though? My ancestors were afraid of predators, so they invented spears. Afraid of hunger, invented agriculture. Afraid of dying from diseases, invented medicine. We didn't eliminate the fear. We just refused to let it make our decisions. Marcus grinned. We're a species that invented extreme sports. We jump out of perfectly functional aircraft for entertainment. We watch horror movies and ride roller coasters and eat food that causes physical pain because we think it's fun. That is insane, Krill said flatly. That's humanity. We have a saying, hold my beer. It means watch me do something statistically inadvisable while you provide moral support and possibly medical assistance. A Yelnari counselor, whose species was known for their cautious nature, spoke up. But surely you must stop when the danger becomes real. Oh, we know it's real. That's what makes it worth doing. Marcus shrugged. One of our most popular career paths is running into burning buildings to save strangers. We call them heroes. We have people who defuse bombs for a living. People who study volcanoes by standing next to them. We sent people to our moon in a rocket that was basically a controlled explosion. And we did it with computers less powerful than the one in my toaster. Vrax was frantically taking notes. So you acknowledge the fear exists? Absolutely. Fear is useful data. It tells you when something might kill you. Marcus sat back down. We just developed this really annoying habit of doing the thing that might kill us anyway, especially if someone says we can't, or if it needs doing, or if we're just really curious about what would happen. Your fear response is not missing, Vrax said slowly, his scales settling into a contemplative purple. It is simply disconnected from your decision-making process, more like we put it in the passenger seat instead of letting it drive. That is the most terrifying thing I have heard today, Vorn muttered. Thanks, Marcus said brightly. Ambassador Krill's limbs tangled themselves briefly. Let me ensure I understand. Your species feels fear but chooses to ignore it. We prefer acknowledge and override. Sounds more professional. And this is common among humans? Universal? No. But common enough that we've colonized 6 planets in 40 years, 3 of which your council classified as uninhabitable. Marcus finished his sandwich. We saw uninhabitable and read it as challenging. The chamber erupted in a dozen languages worth of concerned conversation. Marcus waited patiently, watching various species grapple with the concept that somewhere in the galaxy, there was an entire civilization of beings who treated fear as a suggestion rather than a commandment. Finally, a small voice from the collective mind spoke. What happens when you encounter something truly frightening? Something beyond your ability to overcome? Marcus was quiet for a moment. We try anyway, and if we fail, at least we went down swinging. There are worse legacies than being the species that refused to quit. The emergency klaxon interrupted what was shaping up to be a fascinating debate about human psychology versus every other species' survival instincts. Red lights bathed the council chamber as an automated voice announced hull breach in Sector 7, and all personnel should report to emergency stations. Everyone panicked according to their biology. The Yelnari representatives immediately formed a defensive cluster. The Kralthians began broadcasting distress calls. Ambassador Krill's limbs locked up in the Danthorian freeze response. Vrax's scales flashed every color of fear his species had evolved. Marcus stood up, stretched, and tapped the comm panel on the table. This is Webb in Council Chamber Alpha. What's the situation? A harried voice responded through static. Meteor strike, hull breach. We are losing atmosphere in the residential quarter. Evacuation protocols are failing. Blast doors will not seal. How many people in that section? 247. Right. Keep everyone calm. I'm on my way. Marcus headed for the door. Vorn, despite his own fear responses lighting up like a solstice tree, managed to speak. You cannot go there. It is dangerous. Yeah, that's generally what hull breaches are. Marcus grabbed an emergency toolkit from the wall. But someone's got to fix it. You are a cargo hauler, not an engineer. I'm a cargo hauler who keeps a 40-year-old ship running on spite and improvisation. Close enough. He looked back at the frozen council. Anyone else coming, or are we waiting for the fear to pass? Something in his tone cut through the panic. Vorn's training kicked in. I will coordinate evacuation routes. Perfect. Vrax, you're on medical standby. Krill, use that diplomatic voice to keep everyone from losing their minds. Marcus grinned. See? Teamwork. The next 20 minutes were what Marcus would later describe as mildly exciting. He ran through corridors while providing running commentary over the comm system, because apparently talking helped keep everyone else focused. Okay, I'm at Sector 7. Yes, there's a hole. It's a big hole. Very impressive hole. Some really committed structural damage. His voice remained steady even as wind howled around him. Vorn, I'm sealing bulkhead C. Route everyone through the secondary passages. Confirmed. Sensors show you are in a decompression zone. Yeah, it's breezy. Vrax, I'm sending through some people with exposure injuries. Nothing critical, but they'll need attention. Acknowledged. Marcus, your biosigns are elevated but still showing no fear response. That's because I'm annoyed, not scared. This was completely preventable with proper meteor shielding, and I'm going to file such a detailed complaint about this. He grunted with effort. Blast door 7 has a damaged hydraulic. I'm bypassing it manually. Manually means using your physical strength against a door designed to withstand explosive decompression, Vorn said. Sure, but I'm very motivated by spite. Something shifted in the way he said it. Not bravado, not fearlessness. Just a stubborn refusal to accept an unacceptable situation. And somehow, broadcast through the station's emergency system, that attitude became infectious. Other voices started chiming in. A Hive-World engineer offered technical advice. A Yelnari doctor coordinated triage. Even Ambassador Krill's diplomatic training kicked in, his voice smoothing out the rough edges of panic. Marcus kept talking, kept working, kept making jokes that were more groan-worthy than funny. And people stopped freezing. They started moving. When the blast doors finally sealed and atmosphere stabilized, Marcus was sitting on the floor of Sector 7, breathing hard, covered in hydraulic fluid. Everyone accounted for? He asked over the comm. All 247 residents evacuated safely, Vorn confirmed, and there was something new in his voice. Something that sounded like respect. Outstanding. Someone want to send a sandwich to Sector 7? I lost mine in the excitement. The formal council verdict came down 3 days later, after Vrax had updated approximately 6,000 pages of xenobiological documentation, and Vorn had filed an incident report that was being studied by security academies across 3 sectors. Ambassador Krill read the decision with his usual bureaucratic formality. After extensive analysis and consultation, the Galactic Council has determined that human Marcus Webb does not represent a malfunction in bioscanner technology, but rather a fundamental difference in species psychology. Marcus, standing in the same council chamber, managed not to say, "I told you so." He thought it very loudly, though. Humans, Krill continued, possess fear responses consistent with other sentient species. However, they have developed what can only be described as a cultural override system. They acknowledge fear while simultaneously choosing actions contrary to fear-based decision-making. We're calling it fear acknowledged but disregarded, Vrax added, his scales a proud academic purple, or FABD for short. I'm publishing 4 papers about it. Catchy, Marcus said. Vorn stepped forward, looking like each word was being physically extracted. The human also demonstrated that this trait, while baffling, has practical applications in crisis scenarios. His presence stabilized evacuation efforts. His competence was matched only by his complete disregard for proper safety protocols. I'll take that as a compliment. It was not intended as one. I'm taking it anyway. Ambassador Krill's limbs waved in what might have been amusement or exasperation, possibly both. Human Marcus Webb, you are cleared for travel throughout Galactic Council space. We are also issuing you a commendation for your actions during the emergency. Marcus accepted the datapad containing his commendation. This is fancy. Can I use it to get discounts at station restaurants? That is not its intended purpose. So that's a maybe. Vorn's eye stalks drooped in what Marcus had learned was Kralthian resignation. Humans. The galaxy is going to have to completely reorganize crisis response protocols now that we know your species exists. Look on the bright side, Marcus said, heading toward the door. At least we're friendly. That is what concerns me most. As Marcus left the chamber, he passed through the bioscanner one final time. The display flickered. Fear response detected, mild concern regarding possible forgotten coffee pot on ship. Vorn watched him go, then turned to Vrax. I have reviewed humanity's application to the Galactic Council. And? They want to join our military response division. Vrax's scales went white. All of them? No. Just the ones who think crisis work sounds fun. In the corridor, Marcus was whistling. He had deliveries to make, a ship to maintain, and an entire galaxy that was just starting to understand that humanity, his greatest strength, was also the thing that made absolutely no evolutionary sense whatsoever. Fear was universal. But so apparently was the human tendency to look fear in its many-eyed face and say, "Yeah, but watch this." Vorn pulled up the files on human culture, specifically the section on something called "Hold My Beer Moments." He read for exactly 90 seconds before deciding he needed a drink. In a galaxy ruled by fear, humanity had somehow evolved to treat it like an annoying coworker instead of a survival mechanism, and they were about to become everyone else's problem. Vorn's second request for reassignment was already being processed, but deep down, in the part of himself that had watched Marcus Webb manually force open a blast door while cracking jokes, he had to admit something remarkable. Humans were absolutely terrifying, and they were on the Council's side. The galaxy would never be the same.